The Boss OC-3. This pedal has been a staple within John's rig for the better part of at least 7 years now. This pedal has been used in both his solo tours as well as Dead & Company, and one of the biggest questions I see in my comments and DMs on Instagram is, when does John use the Boss OC-3, especially within his own solo career context? So today I'm going to answer that question for you guys. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing you guys need to know about the OC-3 is that this pedal, even though it's been on almost every single one of John's board for the past few years now, it's not an important pedal in terms of his rig at all. The octave effect as a whole is something John rarely uses, and it's not one that should be taken into high consideration if you're building a John Mayer pedal board or inspired rig. This isn't one that should be anywhere near the top of that list, if I'm honest. I know it's difficult when you see it on his pedal board so often, but I promise you guys this is not one of those top pedals, and it's definitely not a must-have effect for the John Mayer thing at all. But why would John have a pedal on his pedal board so consistently that he would rarely ever use? And well, the simple answer is that the OC-3 is just one of those effects that John liked to have in case the mood ever took him. If he ever decided to use it, it was there. And it's one of those cases of he'd rather have it on his pedal board and have access to that sound if he felt like it at the spur of the moment, than not have it on his pedal board and just not be able to use it just by virtue of it not being on the pedal board. Now, with that all said, the main example of when you'd hear John using the Boss OC-3 is during Vultures. Now, Vultures as a whole is just such a jam song, and the introductions that they would do for this song, specifically during the 2017 World Tour with the John Mayer Trio set, they were very jammy, and John would implement the OC-3 as part of that introduction to Vultures, and you get that beautiful octave effect, and it just added a different dynamic to the song and the introduction part of that song before they actually launched into the main riff of Vultures. So that opening jam for Vultures, specifically during the 2017 World Tour, is probably the biggest example, honestly, of John using it during his solo career. Now, the example of the intro jam for Vultures is without a doubt the most consistent that we've seen John use the OC-3 for a specific song. With that said and done though, he still never used it every time for Vultures. It was one of those cases where, again, if in the moment, if he was jamming along with Steve and Pino, if he felt like using the octave effect, he would. But it wasn't a consistent thing, and you saw him use it less in that context during the 2019 World Tour. So again, even though Vultures is the best example that we have of it, it's definitely not a consistent thing or a must-have pedal for that song. It's really just for the jam at the beginning, if anything else. Now, this second example that I'm about to show you guys is another one that isn't very well known, but is a great example of just showcasing how the OC-3 is an effect that John would use whenever the mood took him. If he was feeling like using it at that specific moment during a show, he had it to turn on. And this example is during the outro solo of Helpless. Now, this is a rare instance where during an outro solo, John would throw on the OC-3 just to change things up. It's just a different effect that he would very rarely use on some of these bigger outro solos, but just added something different, and it was fun, especially in the moment if he decided, hey, I'm going to throw on the OC-3 and let's just have some fun with this outro solo and the octave effect going. Now, these two examples that I've shown you guys, of course, are very cool. There's no question about it. Whether it's an intro jam or an outro solo, adding that octave effect is something really cool that John would do, and it just changed things up from the same old effects being used on those parts every night. But I have to really hammer the point home to you guys that the Boss OC-3 is not a must-have pedal for John Mayer's sound. If you're doing a John Mayer inspired rig, it definitely is not a pedal that you honestly really need to consider, if I'm being honest. It's fun for sure, but it's definitely not a key part of his sound or anything that would be considered a fundamental. It will be very interesting to see as well if on John's next big world tour pedal board, if we see the Boss OC-3 thrown on it again. Of course, the Sawbrock pedal board did not feature this pedal, and it's the first time again in a number of years that we haven't seen John using it, but on some smaller boards we've seen since then, he has brought the OC-3 back, so it's really up in the air if it's going to be used again in a solo tour context. I'm honestly leaning towards it not being a thing during a solo tour anymore, but definitely in the Dead & Company context is where you really see the OC-3 shine. So if you're looking to do more of a Dead & Company inspired pedal board or kind of have a mixture of the two, then the OC-3 does make a lot more sense. But if you're mainly just a fan of John's solo career, again, the OC-3 is definitely not a fundamental and should be near the bottom of your list for John Mayer inspired pedals if you're doing a build. And if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see me do this exact same concept with any other pedals that John would use, just quickly highlighting some real world examples with some discussion for you guys, please leave a comment down below with what you'd like to see, and that'll give me a great idea of what videos to make in the future for all you guys if you did again enjoy this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. We will see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.